All right, y'all. Let's get started. So, what is performance measurement? So, pretty much it's how you measure how well your program or your service is working. And then it's ongoing reporting of accomplishments, like your outputs, the quality, and the outcomes of your programs. So, it's how well a program or service is working. So, the most important performance measures tell us whether the youth of the service, youth receiving the service, are better off. So I want you to think about it in that context, better off, right? There are many different ways to categorize performance measures, but I think they can be categorized into one of these three categories. How much did we do? How well did we do it? And is anyone better off? So let's go back to the second bullet point. When we talk about outputs, that's around efficiency. That's the how much did we do, right? So that's sort of like the amount of products or services that are received. So you can think about it in terms of episodes or contacts. So how many times did we meet, right? When you think about mentoring programs in particular, that's really important. Like you want to monitor number of sessions or number of meetups, things of that nature. Also, when you think about outputs and how you measure the how much, it might be material. So for those of you who it's tangible resources that are provided to a youth. So it might be the number of meals, number of food baskets, number of vouchers, an article of clothing. If it's a winter program, you might give away coats, right? So we gave away X number of coats, cash stipends, prescriptions. You see all of these stats now around the number of vaccinations, right? So it might be things like that. And then the third way that you can kind of measure is time. That can be minutes, hours. So when you think about if you a youth program that's providing some degree of training or therapy, days might be like a homeless shelter, thinking about the length of the stay, or you can think about weeks or months. So that when you talk about outputs, that's sort of how much, right? And then quality is how well. So that's the amount of quality of the products or services. And then finally, when we talk about outcomes, that's the effectiveness piece. How effective is your service? And what difference did it make? Is anyone better off? So it's really around the extent to which a program achieves its intended results, and sort of that measurable change. So it's that difference made piece. And then these are just some questions that performance measurement looks at, right? So it looks at, again, how much product or service does the program provide? What is the quality of those products or services? How many youth completed the program or service? What outcomes does the program aim to achieve? And then what happens to the youth as a result of participation in a program that would not have happened in the program's absence? So that's that difference made piece, right? So because my program is offering X service, this is the difference that I was able to make in the life of a young person. And then just in terms, we measure our results using what's called indicators. So basically, fancy way of just saying, a percent, rate, or ratio that tells us if something is better, if some quality of life condition is better. So just some examples, the percent of students.
Sorry to cut you off. Would you be able to repeat the item before output, quality, outcomes?
Sorry.
It was in the chat. Someone wanted you to repeat that.
Oops. Say that one more time. Let me go to my chat. Sorry.
Sorry, what was the first item before output, quality, outcome?
Oh, it was those three: output, quality, and outcome. Let me go back. Oops. Okay. Yep. Outputs, quality, and outcomes. So it's how much, how well, difference made. And yeah, so we'll jump into that. Did that answer the question? I couldn't see who's. Monique, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And yep, Richard, I believe Adam said this is being recorded. Thanks, Janine. Keep me on track because my screen is different. Like it's hard to see y'all somehow. I guess I'm using a desktop app now, so it's acting a little different. Okay. All right. And these are just, again, some examples of, how you would measure whether something has changed. The percent of students reading at grade level, percent of high school students dropping out of school or graduating, increase in graduation rate, percent of families living above poverty, decreased rate of crime in the community. So that's the percent change, right? And then all performance measures that have ever existed for any program in the history of the universe involve answering essentially two sets of questions, and we talked about that already. How much did we do? How well did we do it? So all this fancy performance metric stuff, you just want to know how much did we do, and that can be in the form of a number, and then how well did we do it in the form of a percentage. And then I talked about effort and effect. That may have been what you were asking about, Monique. Effort, how hard did we try? Effect, is anyone better off? So these are the two dimensions of the work itself. So this is sort of how they all kind of fit together. So think of it in this little quadrant box, if you will, right? So this 4-part quadrant way of describing different types of performance measures. How much service did we deliver? That looks at effort and quantity. How well did we deliver it? Effort and quality. How much change did we produce, or did we, what was the effect? And then what was the quality of that effect, right? So that's the way that we can think about performance metrics. So let's use an example of illustrating illustration around different types of measures for schools or for education programs, right? So how well did we do? The number of students would tell us that. How well do we do it? It might be either a student-teacher ratio or student mentor, youth mentor ratio. Is anyone better off? We maybe can look at the number of high school graduates, and then the quality is the percent of high school graduates, right? So let's add some measures in the lower right quadrant now. So instead of just thinking about number of high school graduates, it's the number of 9th graders who graduate on time and enter college or employment after graduation. And then when you think about the percent of high school graduates, it is the percent of 9th graders who graduate on time and enter college or employment after graduation. So I'll just do a few more. These are just samples. But just to give you an idea of how to think about, what to measure. So if you were in a pediatric practice, right, you could say, look at the number of patients treated, the percent of the patients treated in less than 1 hour. That's a how well. Is anyone better off? The number of children fully immunized in the practice and the percent of children fully immunized in the practice. If we looked at a drug and alcohol treatment program, same thing, number of persons treated. Maybe you could look at certifications of staff. Number of young people who have remained sober at exit and 12 months after exit, and the percent as well. So a few more examples. Fire department. And again, all of these, may not be applicable, just some different ways for us to think about measuring, right? How much did we do? We could look at the number of responses. How many calls did we respond to? What was our response time? Number of fires kept to the room of origin, right? And so when you think about better off measures, is numbers and a percentage oftentimes. And if you think about it just in cars, car production, General Motors, right? Number of production hours, the employees per vehicle that were produced, number of cars sold. You can look at profit, right? That'll tell you if the company's better off, percent of market share. So just some different ways, a lot of different examples of how to think about what to measure and how to measure. So like, why sort the measures for your programs into these categories? Well, really it's simple. All of these categories are not equally important. So the upper left is what would be considered sort of the least important, right? And yet, oftentimes, a lot of us spend our whole careers living in this quadrant where we just kind of count our cases, we count our activities, we count our participants, and that's it. But we don't know if they're better off or if there was anything that changed. So somehow we got to push to get down to this lower right quadrant, the ones that measure whether youth are actually better off. What is that difference that is made? So the rest of these, is also very important, but we want to make sure that we make it down here and don't get stuck with just counting widgets, if you will. And so as you move from the most important measures, you go from having the most control to having the least control. Can somebody talk about what I'm like, give me an example, why is it that you have the most control in this box over here? It's sort of how much did we do? And why do you feel like it's a little more challenging in this lower right-hand quadrant to control for? And y'all can just unmute.
Monique, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Because when we set our program measures, we may say that we're going to help, our goal is to help 20 people. And that is a set amount that that you are going to do, but how many people actually benefited out of those 20 people from the assistance that you provided?
Yeah, like you got 20 intake forms. How many people completed your program? And what changed? What was the result? Like, so that's the easy part. This is why you have the most control here. That's the easy part. Well, if we really are committed to making a difference in the lives of youth in Baltimore City, we have to kind of dig a little bit deeper. It can be scary, right, to look at this data down here. But if I ask most of you why you went into your profession, would most of you say to make a difference, for better off? How many folks, by show of hands, would say I went into it to make a difference, to make impact, right? So we want to make sure that we're thinking about the ways in which what we're doing, our services and programs are making the lives of our youth better. And I see some, let me see, I see some in the chat.
I feel like Wesley had his hand up around the same time as Monique, so I wanted to hold space if he wanted.
Yep.
Wesley wanted to share.
Oh, whoops! Like I said, I had left it up there. I was gonna answer the question about quantity versus quality and most control over least control. Give an example, but I think Monique nailed it. Unless you want me to give one.
You can. You absolutely can, Wesley.
Sure. So, for context, I work for a nonprofit gym, and I thought something we do is we expose young people to exercise as well as healthy lifestyle. So the most control might be, meals cooked, healthy meals cooked with young people. And then least control might be, did they change their diet a year later?
And I would push it a little bit further. Did they change their diet a year later? Because what would be the result if they did change their diet a year later?
Improved health outcomes.
There you go. Yep. Thank you for that. And Wesley, you said it certainly wasn't for the pay, huh?
And Regina, we have a quick question in the chat before you move on. So Jill wanted to know what metrics could be used to measure the impact of art programs on young children grades K-3.
Well, let's hold it. Let's table that for a minute. Janine, we're going to come back to that, and we're going to talk about it as a group. Jill, so we'll come back to that. But I want you to keep that in your mind. I want you to start thinking about why you would be doing art with kids K-3. Why does it matter? That'll help you start thinking about the difference that you want to make or the outcome that you want to see, with your young people. So I want you to start thinking about that first. You can always do your count, but really think about what would a better off measure look like as a result of having participated in this arts program for X period of time. I'm hoping that the young people will walk away with X or this. So I want you to think about it in that context. Just like I started off with this session with the results at the end of this session, I'm hoping this is what you all will walk away with. What's that better off measure? What's that impact that you want to make? And so we'll come back to that, Jill, because we're all going to kind of think about that in our respective programs and share and give feedback to each other. So Janine, you got that? Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thanks for those examples, Monique and Wesley. All right. Okay, so the matter of use, why do we need to measure our performance? The biggest thing is it tells us where we are, but also over time to be able to improve that performance, right? We forget that the purpose of this work is to actually get better. So, for many people, their only experience with performance measures, you think about it, punishment, right? I used to work at a foundation, so I had grantees all the time, and they think, oh, if we don't meet these, it's going to look unfavorable on us, or we may get dinged for, we may not get refunded for our second year. I worked for the state of Maryland before that and monitored state-funded grant programs, right? And so when you think of technical assistance, a lot of times people think of somebody coming in from the funder's perspective and looking through your files and making sure that all of your T's are crossed and all of your I's are dotted. And it doesn't allow space to improve. It doesn't allow space to learn. It doesn't allow space to grow, and it doesn't allow space to be honest, right? So we must create a healthy environment in which you all can use the most important information about what you do to get better. And I believe that BCYF believes in this as well. So it's, with this whole fund, it's about shifting our paradigm about how we think about funders and how we think about funding, and the dynamic that exists between the funder and the grantee, and also that relationship. And so in this instance, when you think about performance measurements, it's to be able to identify where you are and how you can get better. And the only way to do that is through transparency and honesty. And so we want to make sure that we kind of highlight or lift up that when we talk about in this context, we want to avoid the performance measurement equals punishment trap. So basically, we got to always pretend that everything is great and, there's no issues. That's not how we learn. That's not how we grow. And the truth is we do our young people a disservice in that context. So it's 3 ways to compare performance. We can compare performance to ourselves, right? So we look at how we do things over time, and we might realize, oh, our numbers are increasing or our numbers are decreasing, but that tells a story. So what is that story telling you? What's the story behind that curve or behind that trend line? So we compare performance to ourselves. Secondly, compare performance to others. We can benchmark against other organizations. It doesn't always have to be competition across organizations. We can learn from each other. We want to facilitate a peer network. And then thirdly, to standards. So, we compare to others when it's a fair comparison, but that's the way to think about it. All right, so remember, we talked about the 3 basic categories. Okay, so we talked about the 3 basic categories of performance measures. Now let's look at what measures might fall into each of those categories in more detail. So Jill, this may be helpful. So again, this chart, I'm just gonna go ahead and put them all in there so y'all can look at them while I'm reading. So this chart shows in detail sort of the different types of measures that we typically find in each quadrant, and the ones that go with the 3 basic categories. How much did we do? How well did we do it? Is anyone better off? In the upper left quadrant, how much did we do? We might typically count the number of youth or the activities by type, right? Upper right, how well did we do it? That quadrant, that might be a set of common measures that apply to different programs. So there's, you might look at, the staff ratio, morale, how many staff are fully trained, number of youth seen in their own language, right? Things of that nature. And then when we look at activities, what's the quality of those activities? How many youth are completing these activities? If it's an educational based program, we could look at assessments or some type of tools, correct and complete over time, things of that nature. And the lower quadrant is anyone better off. We normally have numbers and percentage, and they're pairs of the same measure. So these usually have to do with some dimensions of better offness, if you will, right? So knowledge and skill increase, some change in knowledge and skill, some change in attitudes or opinions, changes in behavior, or even changes in circumstance. So I'm going to stop there for 1 second. And Jill, I'm going to come back to you and ask you just using these as examples even, what might be some things that you could think about in terms of Better Off? Because I have some ideas, but I want to hear what you think first. And then we'll go to your peers.
Well, with really young children, it's challenging, I think. Like I'm thinking about the program that I've been working with the last year, and one of the best examples of impact that we've received is a letter from the parent of a student who talked about how the difference it made in her child's life, in his engagement across the board, in his happiness, in his opinion of himself. And ultimately, this child was able to apply to a more advanced program and continue. In this case, he was playing the cello. But that is mostly, it's hard to quantify all that, and if you have a child in a program, say for just a year, and you're seeing them twice a week, you're going to, it's mostly in the observational category. I mean, certainly we can say how many kids are in the program, how many kids have been in the program 1 or 2 years, stayed in the program. We can quantify all that, but we can see how happy the children are when they play their final concert, or if the parents tell us they love to play their instrument at home. But it's difficult to quantify those things.
So, a couple of things. You talked about a final concert, right? So
Right.
In order to get to the final concert, I would imagine there has to be some degree of progression of skills for a performance, right? So I wonder
Yes.
if you could think about the increase in skill level over time. That could be one thing. How many students completed the program from start to finish? Because that could be an indicator of increase in skill level, right? You talked about happiness and data from parents. That could be a survey, change in attitude and opinion. If you can even think of not only skill level gain, but knowledge gain, right? Learning the how to read music, that's a knowledge gain. That's a skill and a knowledge gain, right?
Right.
Understanding and reading music is not just about the notes, right? You got to understand. And I'm assuming that it's a musical arts program, is it?
Yes. And
okay, I think I remember you from another training.
Reading music is useful, but in terms of music making, this is just me speaking. It's overemphasized. People always think about reading music as sort of the first skill in music making, which it isn't, in my opinion. But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, but see, and you're the expert. There you go. So you kind of know. So you could. Well, I know my husband could play music by ear. I had to learn how to read music, right? So you're right in different ways to assess, but you could think about that as a skill set. Performance in the final production, increase in attitude or behavior. We also know that art impacts impacts the child holistically, right? So you could look at some of the holistic benefits that the arts play in the development of a child.
Yeah. Well, look at how important arts have been for our mental health, especially in the last 2 years.
Yes.
Like do without it. No, I don't think so.
Yep. So that's what I want you to think about. Why are you doing this? And not you, Jill, but more importantly, your organization. Your organization, I assume, has a mission to do something. And so what results seem feasible within a designated period of time?
Right.
And it could be admission, like you talked about admission into advanced program. That could be a measure.
Right. I don't want to take up too much time, but I have another question about what if you're offering a program that's not available to students because of the socioeconomic situation that they're living in? Say, for example, the program we do is offered in all of the schools in other counties, but not in Baltimore City. So the students that we're serving wouldn't have access to this program if we weren't doing it. So is that something? I mean, we can measure that. We can give some statistics on that. So is demonstration of access opportunity, is that something that is going to be considered in looking at a program in this grant?
When you say demonstration of access and opportunity for who? Your participants in Baltimore, in the surrounding counties,
Yeah,
excluding Baltimore
young
City?
people in Baltimore. Yes.
In
Young
Baltimore
people in
City?
Baltimore. Baltimore City, yes.
That's a
So-
good question.
So,
Let me give it some thought, Jill.
okay.
Let me give that some thought. Janine, add that. Can you add that to the parking lot? And are there other folks who have who would like to chime in on this conversation? Any feedback, thoughts, or comments related to Jill's questions?
Yeah, I actually had concerns with, I want to be able to show how students' mental health has changed after going through the program. But my biggest challenge is trying to word that where it's like when you talk about did they get better, but how do I prove that they got better? I could see working with them, but for funders and people who aren't around them, how would I be able to translate that into a narrative that they can see the progress?
So a couple of thoughts, Dion. One is when your mental health improves, there is some degree of a change in attitude and some degree of a change in behavior. So that you could kind of think about, looking at measuring attitude and behavior. You could do a pre and post survey. You could also, there are also some scales that you can go online and just kind of Google in terms of mental wellness for children. I don't want to get too deep here,
Yeah.
but that's just some preliminary thoughts that I have.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Would anyone else like to chime in or ask another question? Remember, I'm here as a facilitator, but we're all learning from each other.
I had a thought. This is Wendy, and I'm sorry my video is not on, but
No
not
worries.
possible today. As Jill was talking about having like a note from a parent, it dawned on me that that's a great place to start to think about like survey questions. Like, obviously it's very qualitative, and sometimes we want quantitative data. But something to look at, like, what are the things that have come, like, sort of been shared across maybe a couple of those notes, for example, and then build a more quantitative question to get at percentage skills or knowledge or attitude, which is something that I hadn't thought of. Like, we usually keep our data not separate, but we look at qualitative and quantitative, and it was a sort of an aha moment. So I'm glad that, Jill, you breezed that up.
Yep, thank you for that. And I think folks always feel like, quantitative might be better than qualitative. I think they're both equally as important, and they both tell different stories that should kind of bring things together. So I think that that's really important. And to that point, you could survey parents, the number of parents who report that my child, an increase in and we would have to think about how to word it, but, increase in child's attitudes, difference in child's behavior. Parents are with the children likely more often than you all are, so they can help you with assessing. Wesley, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I have a question that's kind of in that same vein. You mentioned the idea of a pre-post, and I think for things like mental health, and obviously we work with physical health as well as mental health. And I love the idea of a pre-post that, kind of attempts to prove that there has been progress in either arena. But my what I'm worried about is pigeonholing myself into, I get a young person on a random day where they fill out the pre-post, and then 2 months later or 6 months later, they fill it out and they woke up on different sides of the bed on those 2 mornings. And despite all the work we did, that they just didn't get sleep the night before they fill out the post test or something like that. And that hurts all the, that speaks to the 6 months of work that we put in. So my question is a pre-post that compares pre and post data better or worse? I like to just ask questions that say, do you feel stronger today? Or do you feel like you have more capacity today than you did 6 months ago? But I worry that that's not necessarily looked upon as strong of a metric.
I'm not going to say pre-post are better. There are different ways that you can assess. And if your program is physical, you could literally do a physical assessment, right? Let me give you a very real life example right now. I have been seeing a personal trainer for 9 weeks. Oh, 9 months. Yes, I'm speaking that into existence. I've been seeing a personal trainer for 9 weeks now, right? I'm noticing I couldn't run on a treadmill when I started in week 1. But in week 9, I can do a little bit of running in a treadmill, right? So for your program in particular that focuses on physical activity, you could legit do physical assessments. Whatever, I don't know the details of your program, but there are different ways that you can assess progress or change over time is what I'm saying. And I'm by no means suggesting that pre and post are better or worse or the only way to measure, but in some instances they may prove to be beneficial.
Understood.
Thank you. You're welcome. Let's see. Let me go in the chat and see. Oh, and my weights increased too, Wesley. I just want you to know.
Say that again.
My weights, the size of my weights with personal training. So, but I say that facetiously and also excitedly and proudly. But I guess my whole point is there are ways to, again, measure progress, physically measure progress over time. Dion, I know that you do jewelry making, right? So it might be the number of pieces that a young person is able to create in a particular period of time, whether that's a particular week, month.
Yeah, I have that
like
as one of them. Yes.
Yeah. All right, let me go to the chat box. Let's see what's happening over there. Oh, thank you, Wesley, for the feedback. All right, so so here's the thinking process in the form of these plain language common sense questions. How can we measure if our youth are better off? Think about that mission. Think about that organizational mission. Why are we doing this? Why are we in service? Why are we offering this program, right? How can we measure if we're delivering our services well? And most likely that's going to be translated into some type of observation or impact to the young people. How are we doing on the most important of these measures? And what's the most important of these measures? Come off of mute or put it in the chat box for me. I need somebody to tell me what we talked about. Most important and least important. Do I need to go back?
Okay. Difference made, right?
Difference made. Is anybody better off? Thank you, Dion. Yes, thank you, Wendy. Yes. Jill, you have a question about what if you create their own metrics and self-assess? That's an option. That's a thought. You just have to think about how to what the measurement looks like and how you can just kind of ensure some degree of I want to say fidelity, but some degree of just making sure it, or you just have to say it's self-reported. And I think that's okay too. A lot of people do self-reported data. So that's okay too. But again, if they're creating their metrics, you got to make sure that those metrics align with the programmatic mission and services as well, right? Because if they say, I want to learn how to speak in Chinese or Korean by the end of this session, and your program is not designed to help them meet that metric, then so you want to make sure there's some degree of alignment is my point. But I think that's actually a good thought, if once you give an overview of the program and young people are acclimated to sort of think about what do you want to get out of, what are you looking to get out of this program? And, that also will inform how you deliver your services, the how well, because now you know what you want to help them to achieve.
Yeah, because a lot of times with older youth, learning how to set goals and track your progress, reassess, redo the goals, that's really important.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, but it wouldn't be your only metric. It could be a part of your
Mhm.
metric.
Yep. And it's motivating. It keeps us going.
Because since
People going.
this fund is really trying to put an emphasis on developing youth leadership, and that's a big part of it.
Leadership. Yep. So ones who want to do solos, number who have signed up for solos is something that just comes to mind. So you can think about what leadership looks like in the context of your program, and that could help you to formulate a measure or measures. So what works? What works or what could work to do better, to be better? We got to be honest with ourselves. If something's not working, this is a way for us to kind of assess in real time what's happening. We need to make some mid-course corrections. So what works or what could we be doing better? And if something's not working or we need to, change, that's okay. I think insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? So what do we propose to do? So what? We're looking at this data, we're looking at our performance metrics, it's trending up, which is a good thing, or it's trending down. What are we going to do about it? And I think we a lot of times we got to be intentional about being open and honest to, looking at the numbers for what they are and making some decisions about it and being honest. And I think, again, with the fund, I provided technical assistance to grantees in the first year. And, we would work together to strategize. Okay, this is not working. Let's think about what needs to be different, what needs to change. Do we need to add something? What's contributing to this? So you really need to think about what do you propose to do. So again, I want to stress, like I did in the beginning of this session, that this is not just about pulling together some metrics for the sake of completing your grant application, but these are things that you should be thinking about with your program and your project in terms of service delivery. All right, so real quick, management information system. What the heck is it? So it's the system that you create in order to manage the data that you collect, right? It could be low tech like papers and files, but I would assume that it's much likely in this age that it's done using a computer program. So like, as you're thinking about using some type of computer program, what might be some of the benefits of using different programs to manage your system? And then what are some of the challenges or considerations? Benefits or challenges or considerations?
May I?
Absolutely.
Are we responding? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
I just can't see
Benefit.
y'all. This is so weird, but go ahead. It's Monique, I think.
Benefits. When you use a software, it's easy to track it. So you don't have a bunch of papers all over the place. But you're tracking it. It may not capture the qualitative aspect of it. So you may have to set up something differently in order to keep track of the progression of who you're assisting.
Yep. That's good, Monique. So you talked about centralizing your data, having it all in one place where you can pull what you need. But you also talked about a challenge of maybe not being able to adequately capture some qualitative data. So Jay Octavia Stevens, the question is, what might be some of the benefits, challenges, or considerations with thinking about a system to manage that data? Because you got to collect it, right? How are you collecting it? And then where are you storing it? What are you doing with it? And so Monique gave us some thoughts. I think I heard somebody else coming off of mute.
Well, if you're doing things that have a lot of numbers, it's good if you use like an Excel file or something you can use to add them up or continue to add them up. Or you can easily convert totals to a percentage or
Yep.
make a pie chart or whatever.
Yep. So that's definitely, and I think, Jill, to your point, a lot of times people sleep on Excel, right? Half the time, Microsoft Office products in general, I feel like we maybe use 50% of the features that, and so, Microsoft Access and Microsoft Excel, they are two programs that you can think about, well, especially Access, like thinking about how to manage your data. So maybe, going through a course or going online and doing some type of tutorial. If you have Microsoft Office as a suite package, oftentimes you have Microsoft Access. And if you use Excel in particular, that's really good for computing numbers. And like you said, converting into percentages, things of that nature. So there are some low-tech computerized systems that you could consider as well. And a lot of times people think I got to get this whole big system. You may, or you may not. Let's see, let me go back here. Data collection has to be very specific when using software. If you have too many variables, it makes it hard to capture your true outcome. Yes, you're getting to my last point, Sasha. I hope I pronounced that right. Wesley said what Wendy said, the benefit data is all in one place. Consideration, is it easy to use? Yes. And is it accessible? So yes, definitely. Let me see. All right, so I think it's important for people to know, another good thing is it's important for you as well as you to convey to your team, why are we collecting this data? Why does this matter? Why is it important for us to do it, right? Is it to monitor people's actions and use it in a punitive way? Or is it there is actual value add? And if so, you want to communicate what that is. And so I guess some other things you need to consider is, will the data be backed up somewhere, right? So if you're using, you might want to, do you have a server on site? Is there a cloud-based system that maybe you could use so you could log in from anywhere, right? Nowadays, many systems are web-based and housed on servers that might be external. So, but with that, you want to think about security. What does this mean for security? How are you securing that information that you're collecting? How accessible? I think Wesley touched on that. How accessible is the data? Who can access the data? Should everybody be able to access the data? And so, last thing I'll say is just, it's important, it's helpful to work backwards rather than start with the data you're going to collect. Almost go backwards. What questions do we want to answer? What do we want to know as we're going through this? Ask yourself, do we really, really need it? Do we need this? How many times y'all done filled out forms for a particular service or program and you're like, why are they asking these? It's 10 pages long. Why are they asking all this information? Like, why are they asking all these questions? They may need it and they may not. So as you're thinking about it, be as simple and as clear as possible, because somebody's got to respond to all of these questions that you're asking. Somebody's got to collect it. Somebody's got to input it somewhere maybe, and somebody's got to go through all of this and make sense of it. So make life easy by being really thoughtful, being really intentional, and being strategic about the questions that you want to ask or that you want to have answered. And if there's anything that's not needed for a report or that's not needed to improve, to help you all get better, your program get better, then it doesn't need to be collected, because if you try to collect everything, it's burdensome to you. It's burdensome if you have staff to those, and then the data is not used. Nobody looks at it. Nobody does anything with it. And so if this is the case, don't collect it. So maybe this is the time for you to really revisit some metrics to see, does this really answer the question of how well we're doing things and whether anybody is better off? And that's what will we do when we get this information back? What will we do with it?
Hey, Regina, I have a quick question. As you were sharing about identify the questions you want to answer, for some reason, the visual that popped into mind is using a logic model. I was wondering if you feel like that would be helpful to folks.
Yes, I didn't want to get too deep, Janine, but
Okay.
normally but that's good because this actually is tied to logic modeling.
Okay.
So if you're not familiar with logic modeling, it's literally a graphic or an illustration of your program design. So it starts with the goals that you want to have accomplished, some of your outputs. We talked about outputs earlier, the activities that's being offered, and then what are the outcomes that we want to see as a result of these activities. And so for those of you who are familiar with it or are interested in it, you can just maybe even Google logic modeling, and I'm happy to provide some follow-up resources if you email BCY Fund, assistance@bcyfund.org, assistance@bcyfund.org, and Janine can type that in the chat box. If you're interested in some resources, I do have some resources for logic modeling that'll help you organize your various program components and make it make sense from start, from strategy, or from your goal, your mission, all the way through the program activities, all the way through to final outcomes that you want to see with your program. All right, let me see. J. Octavia Stevenson says, I make charts and slides and sheets, apps to create and make my data collection, and went to classes to learn more on making charts, invoices, etc. The computer program is bite back and free to do. Thank you for sharing that resource. We are creating a peer sharing network. So thank you for sharing that. If there's a link that you're able to easily access, J. Octavia Stevenson, it'd be great if you're able to kind of share that link in the chat box. All right, let me see what else we have here. Different purposes for data collection and documentation via photos, visuals, and similar. Jill, what were you getting at there?
Well, you do want to document the program, you know, with photos and videos and things. So
Yes.
for different kinds of folders and so forth, you do want to have that, not just written reports or numbers.
That's
or
absolutely
whatever.
correct. Yep.
But it's not data, so to speak.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. And I don't know whether BCYF will ask for this time, but I know previously they did ask for, you know, if you had any photos or any other types of graphics, documentation, or information to what's the word I'm looking for? That you would want to append to kind of give a different or a more, oh my gosh, the word is escaping me, but to give a fuller picture of your program services that was offered during a particular reporting period. And so that, I think you make a good point there as well. All right, we are almost through these slides, and then we're going to move on to our next. All right, so again, if we think about it, this is, again, just giving some more examples. As we think about the questions that we may want to have answered. So if we're looking at a young parent education program, right, the question is that we might want to have answered is, who did we serve? And did we serve as many people as we said we would? Did the parents participate? What parents increased their knowledge of parenting, right? So we talked about the indicators, which are percentages, or, you know, something to indicate or to basically verify or help us to answer the question. So in this case, for the first part, who did we serve? It might be number of youth, their demographic information. You could think of age categories. So like this would be in an intake form. So what are the demographics? Would you have the youth to check off their race or ethnicity the same way that BCYF does with data collection in that category? For a youth's age, would you ask their birth year, or could you have them to check off their age based on a range, such as like 8 through 18, or I'm making this up, maybe 8 through 12, 13 through 18, 18 to 22, or you could say 25 or older, right? So you could do ranges. So you need to know how you're going to measure the data. If you want to show an increase in parenting knowledge, are you going to create a questionnaire that asks parents if they increase their knowledge? Are you going to administer a parenting education scale at the end of the sessions? Or maybe you administer the questionnaire both before and after the session. So just thinking about ways that you might be able to measure. And then now we're going to add the measures. So we talked about sort of what those would indicate. And so now we're going to add the measures. So we can use this information not only to describe who we serve, but did parents attend and did they increase their knowledge? But we can also compare it to the objectives that we set for our program. And this will help us to determine if we need to make changes to our program. Again, I can't stress enough that this is not just for reporting purposes to BCYF, but this is information to you as the service provider. So, you know, for example, we said we would serve 50 teens by the end of the program. We can then figure out if we achieve this objective, and if not, why not? And are there some changes that we need to be done? Or did we realize that our targets that we set for 50 participants by the end of the program may have been just unrealistic and too high? And that's okay too. So it's about learning. And as long as you're able to explain what you're learning from your performance metrics or what the data from your metrics are telling you, then that's what's most critical. And you could do that again, sign-in sheet or the questionnaire. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. I know I've been taking questions all along, but let me check the chat box and see what's happening there. So J. Octavia Stevenson says, I can't remember the link, but when you type in the name, it will pop up. And they have locations here in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. and expanding. I learned about them through Safe Street. So again, make sure that you are taking advantage of these resources. It's called Bite Back, BYTEBACK, a free resource. Are there any other questions? No questions? All right,
Well,
okay.
Karina, there was one earlier. I don't know if Jill, we might have touched on that, where it was or someone had asked like what metrics could be used to measure the impact of arts programs on young children. So I don't know if as we went through.
I'm sorry, Janine, say that one more time. Sorry.
What metrics?
Can you say that one more time?
What metrics could be used to measure the impact of arts programs on young children grades K through 3? So I'm not sure if whoever posed the question felt like that was answered as we went along.
Yeah, that was Jill's question, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Yes, I think so. But the other question that I had is that if your program is filling a gap in an opportunity gap for young people, for example, right now, only 12% of Baltimore City students have access to learning an instrument in city schools. But in every other district in Maryland, you have band and string programs in every school. You have orchestras in middle and high schools. So, and this is actually true in urban areas across the country. It didn't used to be this way. When I was a specialist, I found grade 6 orchestra music in file cabinets at the former Northwest High School. It went out, these things started to decline in access with Reagan's policies. So, you know, there's a lot of people working to make sure that young people have access to those kinds of programs. Another, I like to think of, for example, if you're a city student and you want to be a gymnast, how do you do that? You know, if your family can't afford to take you to a special program for that, you know, or a skater.
So let me actually, so yes, access is important. And I think there's another section of the application that would more relate to this sort of notion of access and opportunity. But for this, we're talking about program performance. So when you say access to learning an instrument, the service or the activity is helping them to learn an instrument, providing them with musical arts education.
Right.
Why does learning an instrument matter? So thank you, Wesley. Why does learning an instrument matter? Like, so again, we're talking about program performance here. So by the end of the program, if you just want them to have access, that's great. And that counts in your how much. So the number of students who were able to access this programmatic resource that was offered through our services. All right, that's the how much. But when you're talking about program performance, I want you to think about better off. So you talk about access to learning an instrument. Why are you all helping these young people learn an instrument? What is the benefit to them? And so
Right,
that's program performance. And so that's what I want you to kind of think about.
Okay.
I think that that's important to provide access and opportunities to young people who otherwise would not have had these opportunities. And there was a question earlier that basically said, what's the difference made to the young people if this program did not exist? And so that's what I want you to ask yourself. Addressing the access notion is, I want you to kind of address that maybe in the equity section of
Okay.
your grant application.
Right.
I do think it's important to highlight it and lift it up, but not necessarily, that doesn't tie, because I can grant you access to my program. That doesn't mean I'm going to make a difference in your life, right? I want you to tie it to program performance. Think about your metrics in terms of program performance. What's the difference made as a result of us providing a specific service to young people?
Right.
Wendy, I see your hand.
So I have a question. So we run a variety of programs, and I feel comfortable with our longer term programs, like an after school program. But my question is, like, when you have a program that's like a single session, like an hour workshop, or we also like send resources home to families like once a month. What level of impact is sort of realistic? We struggle with, for example, coming up with metrics around like in that quadrant of quality and effect, because it's harder to measure. So I'm curious, any thoughts you have around, for those sort of shorter term programming, like should we really try to find that quadrant, or are there other, like, sort of what level of impact is?
You absolutely should try to find that quadrant. And actually, we're going to spend the next maybe 30 minutes or so, like let's dig, let's roll our sleeves up. So Wendy, tell me again, give me a quick, thank you, Jill, so much. Have a great evening. Wendy, what services does your program offer?
So we teach food literacy skills to kids and families. So we do that in a variety of ways. We have a 12-week after school program, for example. But what I'm thinking about more is we do like what we call them food explorer events, which is sort of what I would call like an old school food night, or back to school night activity where families get together in a room and when everyone could, and go around to different stations. So it's like an hour and a half. And then we have the other one that I'm thinking about is we have it's called TWK at Home, and we
say it again. It's called, what is it?
TWK. So we're Taste-Wise Kids. So TWK are initials, at home. We send home resources to kids and families once a month through their teachers.
Okay, so here's some thoughts just off the top, and I want all of y'all thinking about it too. This is the consultative section of this presentation. Again, I'm the facilitator, but we're all learning from each other. So what I think about is when you talk about TWK at Home, you provide resources to kids and families. What are those resources for? Why? So again, it goes back to the question of why. Why are we doing what we're doing? So we're sending these resources home for what, or to what end? What result are we looking for? Are we looking for, I'm making this up because I don't know, but are we looking for healthier food choices? Are we looking, through the Food Explorer event, are we looking at expanding knowledge about different foods and expanding palettes for different foods? I guess I'm just trying to think about, like, what type of information or resources are we providing to kids and families, and why?
So, and that makes sense. And I've thought of that. And so I guess clarify my question then. So we have, I think it's increase of knowledge, increase of attitudes. So then I guess my follow-up question is how we measure that when we have limited access to those families. So I guess we can do the best we can in explaining it in our grant application, but I guess I'm wondering if we are lucky enough to get funding from you all, if we aren't, will we also get some assistance on like how best to measure that, or is that something to
you likely make if and again, I'm not certain of what the process will be this go round, but in the past there was a technical assistance provider assigned to each grantee to help refine and think through. Refine, not think through, because measures had to be submitted on the front end in terms of the outcome that you want to see. But one thing you said was a change or increase in their knowledge and attitude. If increase in knowledge and attitude, I'm assuming around foods, is achieved, then what?
Well, then ultimately we'd hope to see change in behavior around making different food choices,
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, so I see the outcome and the metric. I guess I struggle with how we measure that given our
You
level.
could ask, I'm thinking about if it's, at-home resources, you could survey to ask how many folks have taken action on one thing from the TWK at home. I'm making this up because I don't know the frequency or what it is. TWK at home box that was sent out last month. How many folks have done at least one thing? And you could think about what that percentage, what that number would look like. So would you aim to have 100% or 90% of your families to take at least one action from the TWK at home resource each month or each week, whatever the frequency is that they, they're doing that.
No, that's really helpful. I like the phrasing of take action, because it's not always complete something, because some families don't have bandwidth, but if you did something to further your learning, I like that phrasing. That's really helpful.
And if you think about it, for those of you who have taken our post survey from these TA sessions, there is a question that talks about, naming one specific action that you will take walking away from this training. Because again, we want to be action oriented. It's nice to gain all of this information, but then what are you going to do with it? And so that's one way you could think about it. For the Food Explorer event, you could even ask that question there. Number of folks or percent of folks the percent of folks, so X number out of the total number of participants who attended the Food Explorer event tried something that they'd never had before, or X number of participants out of the total number were open to using it at home, or I don't know. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, because again, your ultimate goal is to help increase knowledge and attitudes with hopes of making different or healthier food choices, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Others? Let's go, y'all. Let's get these performance metrics, so y'all can start jotting them down, because the portal opens, what's today's date? The 13th. The portal opens Friday. So this is designed to be a working session. Let's talk about them. Monique, I'm getting ready to call on you, right? Monique, tell people about your program a little bit and your metrics that you're thinking about. Or let's talk through them. If you don't have them, that's cool too.
So what's interesting is, so hi everyone. My name is Monique Levy, and the organization that I founded is Led Ladies. And what we do is the primary program that we had was emergency eviction prevention. It's interesting because I was sitting here thinking, we're actually introducing, or my desire is to introduce a pilot program, which is monthly rental assistance.
Okay.
And so with BCYF, I was going to focus on operational funding plus the pilot program. With the pilot program, the purpose of it is to assist women with that monthly, to release or relieve a little bit of that monthly financial burden, that stress, by not only teaching them how to create a savings account, how to budget, but also giving them funds so that they can put something in savings as well. So the goal at the end of the program would be for them to all have savings accounts, for them to know how to budget their money, and for us to take a closer look at their monthly expenses and things of that nature throughout the time span of the program. So I've been debating. I think that this grant, I'm going to specifically focus on the pilot program, although the emergency eviction part, I'm wondering, should I include that since it's established with all of our results and things of that nature, or should I just focus on one program? Blah, 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 blah.
No, that was good. I can't answer that question about whether you should focus on one or both. But what I am going to ask you is, if you focused on both, let's talk it through for a minute. This might help you. What questions would you want to have answered by the end of the year?
So there are different results depending on which program. So
Mhm.
the pilot program, the result would be that they would understand money. So financial management is a big one. And they'll also understand how their money is coming in and how to use their money. I guess that kind of goes with it. Yes.
As indicated by what? Would that be creation of a budget, or what would tell you that there's better financial management?
So when they come in, we would get all the information. So we'll find out where they are financially. They would sit through all of our different financial sessions provided by a local financial institution. And so they would have budgets, and they would be learning how to master and utilize the budget throughout the time span by meeting.
So it's not just about creating that budget, it's about following that budget as well, right?
Yes. Look at me. Every time I say you right, I should be right.
It's real cute, but are we using it? Is it helping? Do we need to adjust? J. Octavia Stevens says, has you tried a volunteer person for a bank that wouldn't mind helping you to break it down to them? So
it's not our organization that's providing the financial part. Okay. It's a bank that's already partnered with us.
Good. Awesome. Okay. Anything else you want to share? Any other questions you have? As you think about kind of measurements? I mean, because I feel like you already have your metrics for your rental assistance program. And for those who don't know, Monique is a previous BCYF year 1 grantee. So yeah, any other questions or anything you would want to share about that year 1 process of developing your performance metrics? And then once you were awarded, refinement of your measures or things like that, like.
Just that anybody who is a part of this session right now, if you can go back and review it over and over again, understanding those performance measures, just making sure that it makes sense and that it's impactful and that it makes a difference. Recording things that doesn't matter, it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to support your program. And just being patient with yourself and being open to take notes and know that every opportunity is a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Monique. And we talked about, remember we had those quadrants where we talked about least control and most control. We have the most control we can count, right? So if you got all these measures, number of this, number of participants, and I'm not saying that they're not important, because they are important, but they're the least important if you think about those 4 quadrants. Like, so we have these numbers of folks participating in these programs, going through these modules or whatever it is, to what end you want to, and that's what you want to think about. To what end? What's that difference made piece? All right, let's go to the chat box. Thank you, Monique. Okay. So let's see, Candace, mastering and having a competition and how much was saved each month may incentivize saving. Candace just gave you a suggestion. I like it, Candace. Wendy says, if we have a question related to the grant, but not specific to performance measures, can we also email the assistance at bcyfund.org as well? You absolutely can, Wendy. You should know also that a link will be posted, if it's not already yet posted to the website, where you can sign up for one-on-one in-person technical assistance in working through your grant application. So there should be a link for that. Also on Saturday, April 30th, Saturday, May 7th, and Saturday, May 14th, for those of you who are still just not ready to completely be in person with folks, that opportunity will be available virtually as well. And you could sign up for that on the website as well. Others, I see Dion, I see Sasha. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Nita or Nada? Brianna, Losi, I'm just saying, you know, if you want to kind of talk through with your peers and have some exchange, or if you have questions, now is the time.
So, good evening, everybody. I didn't hear, my phone had went out because I was driving, but I didn't hear the last lady's name. But I sort of am like with her, like we have a homeless youth program for homeless youth. And we have different sections of our program. So we have an outreach part of our program. We have transitional housing part of our program. And then we have our basic shelter, emergency shelter for our program. So just by listening to everybody's conversation and just, this is our first year. We started before COVID and we kind of died down because of COVID, and now we're ramping back up. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe focus on one area first, but then I don't want to leave out another area when we have youth that want to come in. So when we're doing the, the questions, and we have our intake form, it mostly answers all the questions that we want to, go back and do our program, look at, see how our statistics are, where they're coming from, what ages are they coming from. We have that, but I think it's just going to be hard for us to do, talk about all of our programs. So I think just by talking to her, we might want to just focus on one part of the program when we do our grant, and then do our evaluations and our metrics and stuff just based off one part. I don't know, maybe people can give me feedback about it, because I just feel like I'm just like all over the place with everything.
Thoughts? Monique asked, what's the name of the program?
It's called Hearts of Hope Incorporated, and we're on Liberty Heights Avenue, and I'll put it in the chat just in case anybody wants to follow us or wants to network. We're open to everything.
Thanks, Wendy. Is it Nita or Nada?
My name is Danita, but
oh man,
this is connected to my personal my personal account, so my name keeps coming up. I gotta change it in there.
It's okay. It's okay.
So it's Danita.
Danita, got it. Okay. All right. So, any thoughts for Danita with what she shared?
I do. It's exciting. When I hear 3 programs in year 1, though, I'm kind of like, that's a lot. But I hear that you said you already established it. But that's like amazing. I definitely want to connect. That's offline, but I definitely want to get your email. But I would suggest that with this program, have you received grants before?
No, we haven't received a big grant, but we've receiving a little bit of grants here and there. From my understanding, we are the second homeless youth shelter in Baltimore City. I don't know why I chose Baltimore City, but I own daycare, so I just said, let me start in Baltimore City. But we have been reached from Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County have contacted us about youth. The way I set the program up, I didn't think about that. I just put the program together, and then when I'm filling out for grants and stuff, I'm like, wait, we could do a grant for just our outreach program. We could do a grant just for our transitional program. So now I'm finding myself going back and making just putting specific details about those individual programs, because it's just so many grants out there for each part of my program. I didn't even look at it as that. My thought was one whole program. But now as I'm getting into these grants, it's individual grants out there for each part of our program. And I didn't do that. I didn't individualize that first.
Yeah. And
if that makes sense.
Yep. It makes absolutely perfect sense. And I think to Janine's point earlier, again, I didn't want to go too deep because we only had 2 hours, but for those of you who are just starting out and designing your program, a logic model may be a way for you to organize it so you can think about all of those different components and then the results. What the outputs are that you need for each one, and then activities associated with it, and then what are the outcomes or the results that you want to see from each of the components. So it's one comprehensive program, but with these different aspects, you're able to more easily break it up into different funding streams, because the truth of the matter is this BCYF Grassroots Fund grant award is $50,000 over 3 years, right? So you want to be strategic about what components of your program you want to utilize the grant funds for. And you're not just limited to just this fund. Like you said, there are plenty of other funding opportunities as well. So I think that's pretty strategic on your part. Any other questions or comments? Dion, I'm gonna ask you if you have, Dion is also a previous BCYF grantee. Any questions, comments, anything you think is important to share related to performance metrics with the group?
Yeah, when I did my program, it was in the middle of COVID, so I had to change my jewelry making program to a virtual program. And one of the things that this is why I was asking how to incorporate the mental health piece, because that's a big part of our program. We basically use jewelry making to help children to be more aware of wellness. And so our program digs a little deeper. It's not just you come and make jewelry and decide you're going to be, an artist, but we have topics that are aligned with each project each week. We have one where we talk about resilience when they work with wire jewelry. And so I wanted to have something that was going to show how they've pretty much improved over the course of the program. And one thing I learned from being in BCYF the first go around, I had mostly like, the attendance piece. Like, I think one of my metrics was like 90% attendance. And I mean, though that's good, they're logging on. And listen, there were days when I'm like, I don't know what's going on with
Like,
internet.
hello, anybody there?
Stuff was just going crazy and it was just so annoying. I'm trying to teach, and all right, it's to the point where the kids are frustrated, like forget it and don't log back in, or they'll start, don't finish, and devices died, all types of stuff like that. So I wanted to dig a little deeper and not like stay away from attendance. Of course, that would be important. And I also had it where one of the ones I had was the amount of each person would be responsible for creating a piece of jewelry independently after they've had 7 sessions. And so that was a good one because I was able to actually show their work. And some of them had like 6, 7 pieces. They had a whole collection going. So that was that was a good thing for that one. But I definitely know now, like I said, not that I'm staying away from attendance or how many children are in the program, but having something a little bit more profound that they can relate to and the funders can see, and for me to see like, what are y'all getting out of it? That's why I like that question when you was like, how does it benefit them? Like, what are they getting out of it? Because that's something that I'm definitely thinking about to create a third metric.
Thank you, Dion. So Richard put something in the chat that ties with what you just said. He says, unfortunately, he was disconnected for the meeting, but this point might have been addressed. But remember that your performance metrics must be aligned with your mission, goals, and objectives. Hence, again, why I mentioned logic models specifically for my newer organizations. What is the problem that your initiative, project, or program is trying to address and solve? Richard, it is not redundant. You can never state it enough. I've continuously stated it throughout today's session. And so Dion talked about her why, right? Her why is to address or improve the mental wellness of young people, and it's young girls in particular, right, Dion? The how is through her Beadly Speaking jewelry making program. Does that make sense to folks? So she's using jewelry as a connection to mental wellness, and it's not jewelry making just for jewelry making's sake. So really think about your why. Richard, did you want to add anything?
No, I just know that a lot of folks tend to forget that the point that I'm trying to make here, and that you have basically eloquently validated, that if you are outside of your mission and goals and objectives, if you're not glued in and not tuned into what your goals and objectives are, your performance metrics are going to be out of alignment. We've seen that over and over again. So we're stressing that you need to really be clear about what it is that you're trying to do. You know, once you solidify or once you fine tune your goals, your performance metrics become easier to develop into, because some of this information you're trying to get is going to be quantitative and some of it is going to be qualitative. And you got to be very clear about which path you're going to, and you might combine each or all of it, but you also need to be clear about what is the information that you can collect. All these things are going to have to be part of your thinking as you put all this together. And we have seen performance metrics that are out just totally misaligned with the goals and the mission. So, I mean, so please, you know, keep that in mind as you start to develop your metrics. And I hope that's clear, because again, we've seen what happens when, and evaluators as well, they basically can clearly see that you don't really know what your goals are, or that you have forgotten what your goals are. So just keep that in mind. That's all.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, they should most certainly be lined up. We're doing this, seeking this outcome. We're doing this, seeking this outcome. And just to go back to some of the examples that we heard about earlier, like Monique, why? It's because she wants to help women become financially stable, right? Her how is providing monthly rental assistance stipends and financial literacy services, right? I think it was Wendy who, her why is she wants to support families in making better food choices. That's her why. Her how is through the Food Explorer events, her TWK at home events, where she provides resources to kids and their families, right? Remember, if y'all remember early on, I was pushing Jill. Jill was saying, we're providing access for young people to learn an instrument. Why? Why do we want young people? Why are we teaching them how to learn an instrument? And Richard, I was hoping, I realized that you had fell off. I was hoping that you were on earlier because Jill, she had to jump off, but she has attended some of our previous sessions and was sort of trying to think about performance metrics for a musical arts program for children. I think it was K through 3rd grade. And so, you know, we talked through some questions or things to think about or consider, because, you know, I pushed her to think about, why does learning an instrument matter? Why are you all offering this service to young people? So.
And what's the impact if you do what you claim you're trying to do? What's the impact? I mean, you know, are we just doing this work just to basically count numbers? Or what are we really trying to show at the end of the term of this grant? What do we really want to point to as success? What does success mean? And how do we define success?
Yes.
How do we define success? So that's going to be part of your thinking as well. Otherwise, we're just basically engaged in, I won't call it superfluous, you know, work, but this work is designed to really have impact.
Yep.
On our the individuals that we're working with, on our community. At the end of the day, we want to have impact on our community, and a lot of times we forget about that. So
you said it, Richard. Nothing else I need to say. The folks have other questions. You know, want to brainstorm with your community of peers. Anything else? How y'all coming along with your? For those of you who will be applying to the Grassroots Fund, have you all started thinking about your metrics that will be associated with the program you'll be applying for? I see Dion shaking her head. Yes. You're so welcome, Candace. Sasha, I was getting ready to call on you and you just came off of mute. Look at that. Go ahead.
I'm in my car. I want to say the largest piece of the puzzle that me and Wesley have walked away from is having not just data, but extremely specific data, not allowing people to go outside of what we're looking for so that it is truly measurable. Because if not, we're going to have all these answers, but then what do they really mean? So I think that's when we were like he was like trying to text me. I'm looking at my screen like, no, I'm taking notes, leave me alone. But it really comes down to, if we're going to go with using a series like, teenagers 14 to 16, it has to be consistent across the board or the data is useless.
Yep. That's good. What were you going to say, Richard?
No, I'm saying she's spot on.
Yep.
That's
Spot on. Thank you for sharing that, Sasha. And I would encourage all of you to think about, like, again, if you think about why are we collecting this data? Why do we want to know this? Work backwards. What's the questions that you want to answer or be able to answer to BCYF or to any funder, but most importantly, to yourself and your organization. So thank you for lifting that up. Other takeaways from today. Thank you for that takeaway, Sasha. Other takeaways from today.
Having all the data in one central location. Listen, that was a nightmare for me. I did not understand technology that well. And now I'm like thrust into it via doing everything online. So yeah, now I know just having everything together, because I had the Excel attendance piece, and I would track to see, how many students, and it was easy to, figure out incentives based on that. But I didn't even know about, like the forms like JOT and all of those that I could have been using to get the pre and post test. So yeah, sending stuff in Word, you ain't getting it back. Like,
listen. That's good stuff. Thank you, Dion. And y'all know what? I talked about Microsoft Office product, Excel and Access. Somebody gave another recommendation in the chat. Google Forms is another free database, if you will, that you can use to kind of gather information and have it all in one place. It's on a cloud. So if your computer dies, you can go to somebody else's computer and access the information. So that's another resource. Thank you, Dion. Other takeaways.
Mine is similar to Dion's. Just remembering that, so we do like intake, but first making sure, like you said, that the questions that you're asking actually make sense and need to be captured. And also making sure that we include a pre-questionnaire. Like, let's find out where they are.
Baseline assessment.
Right. Because I have someone currently, I'm sorry, were you saying something, Mr. Richard?
No, I'm just agreeing. I'm sorry.
No, because that's what I was thinking about with a young lady that just came on board yesterday. I'm thinking, okay, you did your intake, but you could have did a questionnaire. So now, thank goodness to this session, now I can go ahead and get that questionnaire together and send it to someone. We need a pre-questionnaire. Let's judge where they are. How do they feel now about their money management and different things? And then at the end, measure it.
Yes. So baseline assessments. See where they are at entry point and where they are at exit. Good stuff. Anyone else? Losi, Lamumba, J. Octavia, Stevens, Danita. Anything else y'all want to share? Any takeaways? Okay, so
one thing that I wanted to share is like when it was mentioned about using Google Forms, it's not always like a fancy system. It's just learning how to manipulate the existing form to give you the responses that you need. Like if you like to, for Google Forms, you can indicate like rows and columns. So it really depends on what you want to capture and understanding like that y-axis and x-axis. So you can just kind of manipulate the form to help work for you. So
thanks, Janine. Thank you, thank you. So y'all, what's the most important quadrant, the most important measure that we want to kind of think about? All in unison.
Difference made.
Difference made. Is anyone better off? It's good to report the how much. They want them how much and how well did you do it, but it's the difference made. It's those impact measures. Is anyone better off? So hopefully this has been helpful. For some of you, I'm so glad to see that you're taking advantage of all of these TA sessions or more than one TA session, because again, you know, free resource offering to the community, aligned with the release of the Grassroots Fund application. But this is information that you can take even beyond this Grassroots Fund application. So hopefully other folks, you know, and you all will take advantage of this as well. And you're demonstrating that by being here today. So I thank you for your time. You likely will be emailed a survey. So look out for the follow-up email thanking you for participating. And please give us feedback. I talked about data collection, right? So I want to know, I got my how much. I looked at my attendance numbers, but I want to know how well my service is, right? And I also want to know the difference made, that better off measure. And that's why I asked you all about your takeaways. So that's a way for me to kind of gather some anecdotal data and information about my performance, right? But please be sure to complete the evaluation. All feedback is good feedback, because why? We want to get what? When you look at your performance measures, you do it, what's your purpose? To get better? Okay, thank you. Monique, I see you shaking your head. I'm like, Monique, what are you saying? Yes, to get better. So, you know, we're practicing, we're eating what we're serving pretty much. So be sure to give us that feedback. Janine dropped in the chat box that the next, to register for upcoming sessions, the link is in the chat box. But some of y'all are repeats, so I know y'all got the link, but make sure y'all register. And then on this Saturday, lessons learned from year one grantees. So for those of you who, especially those of you on this call, on this meeting, who were not previously awarded, it'll be good to kind of hear a candid conversation with previous grantees about that process. What else, Richard? What am I missing?
Lessons learned from the entire, you know, phase of your program. I mean, what did you learn? I mean, what would you do different? And what can you offer new grantees that might be of tremendous benefit to them moving forward? So it's going to be that kind of conversation, very direct and very intimate with the past grantees, because they have learned a lot. And it's going to be very revealing, I think, to folks who show up for that session. We think anyway. But keep in mind, you all, this is a very important session, because again, not only how good you're doing, but your funders want to know, whether it's BCYF, they want to know if you know what you're doing, if what you've done works. So performance metrics are extremely important, you all. Thanks, Regina, for this very enlightening session.
No problem. Thank you all. And yes, Janine just put, this isn't only applicable to the Grassroots Fund, but to future funding opportunities for your program.
That's right.
So yeah, just good stuff. Building your toolbox is the way that I like to kind of think about it. You're building your toolbox. So thank you for joining. Have a great night. J. Octavia Stevens is already signed up for Saturday's session, y'all. Saturday's panel.
Great.
I signed up too. Great job, Regina.
Yay. Thank you, Dion. I appreciate y'all so much. Have a great night, and I hope to see y'all again real soon.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.
So did we just hit the stop?
Oh, let me stop recording. Yes.